Hello, and welcome to the Million Dollar Electrician Podcast, where we help home service pros like you supercharge your business and spark up those sales.
I'm Joseph Lucani, and together with my co-host, Clay Newmeyer, we're here to share the secrets that have helped electricians sell over $1 million from a single service van.
Now, it's time for sales. It's time for scale. It's time to become $1 million electrician. Hey, Joe. Hey, you guys. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the $1 Million Electrician. I don't need to say that anymore. There's an intro. Joe, how are you doing, brother?
Man, I feel like we're doing good. I love when you and I get to connect in the background and really just talk about how we're leveling things up and moving things. It's a good day. It's been a good day, man.
Well, today we're connecting on a massive piece, and it's why you need to be billing 300 plus an hour in your residential service business. And there's a reason why. There's a bunch of reasons why. We're going to go through all that today. But first, I want to acknowledge what we were talking about behind the scenes here before we started this podcast. What did you say to me, man? What did you say about taking a swing?
Yeah. So we were getting ready to go into this podcast, and we're talking about all these different business developments we're making. And I said, well, whatever it is, I'm going to show up to the line ready to swing. And you're like, well, what is it you love about this? And then we're saying, well, I'd rather show up to the line ready to swing than be in the background talking about how we need to swing. Because we could talk about it and likely come up with a better plan than if we just go out and do something. But it breeds in action. Compared to saying, I'm going to do something, I'm going to see where the results lead up to. And then based on those results, I'll at least have something in my hand. It may not be pretty, but I'll have something that I can work with. And that I'll level up to the next step.
There you have it, folks. You've got a challenge already. Live up to Joe's standards here. Step up to the plate and take a swing. What are we waiting for? Don't sit around thinking about it. Here's the thing. I want to contribute to that.
Go for it.
Nothing happens if nothing happens. It's like Jim Rohn used to say, nothing changes if nothing changes. Mm-hmm. How many of us are being held back, especially on this topic of pricing right now, not doing the thing that we keep making excuses for, keep saying we're going to do it? Or maybe you're here to disagree with us today and go, what the hell are these guys talking about 300 plus an hour? I can't sell at that rate. Then you'd be like me, you'd be like Joe, you'd be like every other electrician who once held that belief and no longer does. And today we're going to explain to you exactly why this is the truth for you, how you can go and do that, and also relate it to like a guy in our program that had a $290K month with just 6 field staff at a 71% gross profit margin. Joe, that doesn't happen by accident, and it all starts with getting your pricing right. Yes, I said 71%. That's massive. It's massive. But too many of us are falling victim to the, I don't know what's left. I don't know what my gross margin is. I'm just going by the money that hits the bank account, Joe. Do you remember that?
I remember that, but I'm going to say one even worse.
Okay.
Which is when we say, well, how much do you take home? And they go, well, the business account has this. It's like, well, yeah, but how much is the business's and how much is yours? It's like, it's all mine. It's like, no, it's not. And that's when you find the really dismal profit ranges.
Totally. Yeah, we get that a lot. We talk to electricians, and a lot of them are sole proprietors still, early starting. Can't blame you for that. Humble beginnings, man. We all come from there. But saying, oh, we were 50% profit last year. And then I say, okay, what was your salary? Well, that was included in the profit. It's like, okay, well, how much did you earn? Well, 2, 3, even 5 or 600,000 doesn't matter because that equation isn't quite adding up. So step in with us today. Let's go over this pricing, how it can make a difference for you. In fact, why don't we jump into win of the week, Joe? Do you remember what that one is this week?
Yeah, no, I was going to say one of our clients, Brandon, who I'm incredibly proud of, did an absolute challenge and just completely knocked it out of the park.
Okay.
So you know how some people describe their wins, like they say, oh, I sold a big ticket item. But then when you ask them, like, what was it? It was like, oh, well, it was a project. It was like, oh, is it service? No, well, it was less. So we modified it for this, but they're giving us 8 weeks of work. You know, that kind of song and dance?
Yeah. Okay. Making concessions to get the job. You start following someone else's process more than your own. That whole thing.
Yeah. He didn't do that. And that's the best part about it. The win in the week is that he closed a $150,000 project, but it was at 100% service rate There was no modification. There was no concession. There was no white taping. It was, this is my price to do it. This is the full price to have it done. And we either do it at this price or we don't.
Mm,
And the best thing is it was an existing a relationship from what I understand, where it was like, okay, well, you've already seen me do it at a lower rate, same project, but I'm not doing it at those rates anymore. I'm doing it at this
wow.
rate.
Yeah. And as I
And
understand, that was about 30 or 40% higher. So a
yeah,
150K job that otherwise maybe was 100, 110K,
yeah.
but now sold at this simple service rate, a full simple service rate, and
Mhm.
they're meeting him where he's at. That's a superpower that once you take hold of that, it never feels the same again. You know what I mean? That confidence that
Yeah,
builds up. But it also asks a question, Joe. It begs to answer this question is like, well, what is service really then? We've got a guy who came
absolutely.
in, used a simple service rate, locked in a bigger project at that simple service rate, at the full simple service rate again. So what is service really then? Like, when do you say no?
So that's the interesting thing. Now, all of us consider service for the most part being any kind of like residential type call, but you can technically simplify it even further. And you can say, all right, is someone willing to pay what you would charge for a service call? What is your service rate? If someone's willing to say, yep, sign me up for that full rate, then I say that's service work. Like, I don't care if it's a 100-hour project. If every one of those 100 hours was accounted for at full price and you gave them that number and they accepted it, that's service work and we should accept it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
I
cool
like that.
part.
Along with other principles in the offer, like, hey, can you get your deposit? Can you get a 50% deposit to schedule
Mhm.
it? Or at least schedule those draws in a
Mhm.
way that benefits you before that work ever starts and that you know you're getting paid in full at the end of the work. None of the
Mhm.
30, 60, 90-day project nets that we've all suffered before. Like,
Mhm.
throw all that away. If you're willing to give me a 150K project, Joe, you're going to pay me at my full rate to do it
Mhm.
and give me money when I need the money, when I say I want the money. Heck, not only will I do the work, I'll include solutions that include subcontractors under me, and I'll become the general for that job, and I'll run it and make all the money off it instead of following someone else's thread, following their crappy process that's non-existent other than how to not pay people when they need to be paid.
Yeah, I'll be whistling a happy tune the entire time. You want to pay me to have a smile and a whistle the entire time, welcome with a hustle? Full service rate. I guarantee you, every one of your technicians are going to be smiling because you're not going to be breathing down their neck, telling them how slow they're going because you're not losing your ass on this job. You
Yeah,
actually made a fair profit, which means you're treating your team in a better way, and the customer gets a better result, and everyone wins.
100%. And while we're down this rabbit hole, this
Hmm.
kind of begins to explain the first parts of why we need to charge 300 plus an hour on average.
Hmm.
Now, to be honest, you're likely in the range, if you got a couple staff, your humble beginnings, you're actually likely in the range of $400 to $500 an hour.
Hmm.
300 was us being nice in this intro and just saying, hey, we should at least start there. Here's why.
Hmm.
Most of us become electricians humbly. Maybe we're a bit nerdy like the rest, right? Maybe a little bit perfectionist. You enjoy electron flow, you enjoy the theory, and you enjoy helping people with a job that you consider kind of dangerous.
Hmm.
It's cool to be an electrician in my books, Joe. How about you?
I mean, it's not uncool to be an electrician. I've never done any decision in my life with cool being a factor.
Yeah,
So
fair
I've
enough.
never actually had to relate on that. But yeah, I would say of all the trades, electricians being a pretty damn cool person.
We'll tell you what, I loved it from day one, and I know lots of the listeners do too. And I knew that if nothing else, it was going to be a great plan B where I
Yeah.
could have the opportunity to run my own business one day. And even if I didn't, I'd always find a job for someone else as a skilled trade and be
Mhm.
able to show up at 10 for that person and be able to make six figures. I know that I had that opening, that door of the hallway. Does that make sense?
It really, really does. I can completely get where you're coming from there.
But then, just like everyone else, you get your ticket and you start really being challenged. You start really being thrown in the
Mhm.
fire. Oh, and now you're going to service calls independently. Now you run projects or go to opportunity calls independently. Now you're actually learning. And then this confidence comes about you and you realize, gosh, I could do this for myself and have more money and more time. Do
Mhm.
you remember thinking that?
Actually, there was one situation where when I was side jobbing at like 16, 17 years old, I was charging a client $30 an hour. And then something like 8 years later, went back to the same job as my own company, and I was charging him over $300 an hour. And he was complaining at $30 an hour, and he was complaining at $300 an hour, except this time I was getting paid.
Same complaint.
Same complaint, price. He was
Oh
bitching
gosh.
about $30, but he was also bitching about $300. But the fact was, is I was like, at least now it's worth doing this job for this person.
Yep. Yep, for sure. Well, back to the story is like for anyone bootstrapping an electrical business, this is how we learned this stuff. So you go into business for yourself. Who are the first customers always? Friends and family, someone you
Yeah.
know on the block, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we go to them and what? We want to cut deals, but also you look at the work and you realize, gosh, I've got no idea how to price this. So
Mm-hmm.
what do? You use either your old employer's pricing or you start calling around shops and figuring out what they would price for it. And then you just use their price. And maybe even you thought, hey, I'll do better than them to be competitive. I'll just do a little bit more for a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that one?
Slippery
Do a
slope.
little bit
Slippery
more
slope.
for a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
And then next time, a little bit more for a little bit less. And next thing you know, there's more month at the end of the money than money at the end of the month. And you're going, how the heck do people make it in this business?
Or even scarier when they try to price themselves on someone else's pace. Like I used to, where it's, hey, I'm a new, inexperienced electrician. I wonder what the old guy that we used to work with, I wonder what he would have charged. He was a fast electrician. We should price based on how fast he was going because the customer shouldn't have to pay for ours.
Yeah.
And then you end up once again, job was priced properly if I could do it in a quarter of the time, but it's not realistic.
Yep, for sure. So here's the thing. Even if you borrowed pricing from a bigger local competitor, if they weren't 100% service focused, likely running a price book, running the general better practice of service company play at this point, then they likely had a rate of somewhere between $70 and $115 an hour. A lot of those rates are actually derived from someone did do the math at one point for them. But the mistake that they commonly make is anytime it's construction or projects relative, they're dividing their total burdens and growth costs, expenses by 2,000 hours per man.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a full-time year. Would you agree with that? 50 weeks, 40 hours, 2,000 hours?
The math checks out. The maths.
And so for most companies, that results in a range of around $100 an hour for a rate with enough guys there that they're dividing by. And it really is a mistake in the math. In service, though, we don't do that. In fact, there's two wrongs there. One is if we took that same rate, the only way you could ever make even close to enough is to then bill the customer time and material, including going to the warehouse for parts. Cleaning the van at the end of the day, doing your garbage runs, all the stuff that customers don't want to pay for. They don't want to see that extra stuff. They just want what's relevant to the job in front of them. So there's a solution to that. And the solution is to not show them that stuff and to adopt a flat rate pricing system that includes all of the work that you're offering them and all of the off time that doesn't need to be in front of them. It doesn't need to be written, and it comes in the way of a 50% rule as a standard in service. So instead of assuming 2,000 hours, we just assume 1,000 hours. And if you're the average service company that pays yourself a salary, that needs to have an office manager, CSR, that needs a little bit of help in the field, then I'm betting that your expenses with marketing, the website, the van, the shelves, everything that you need, your tools, and again, your salary and your earnings, you're over $300,000, $350,000 a year. Would you agree with that, Joe?
That adds up because the crazy thing is that we don't realize all the office and admin support that we're going to need in order to scale at a certain level. Like, I'm pretty sure if you and I were to go into a van and it was just us and we bootstrapped it, you could get by for a period of time. But the moment you start scaling and you recognize, oh, I need these things, but you don't account for them, that's where your margin becomes so much smaller. So yeah, the numbers do line up. If you have your support staff, you're going to need to pay for them.
And we still didn't even account for things like insurance. Those prices aren't going down, right? They're going up. Fuel cost. What about those prices? They're not going down, they're going up. Inflation is happening, and most of us don't even account for that. There's many of people listening to this charge $110 4 years ago and are still trying to charge it today and meeting the same price objections that you talked about, from $30 to $300 an hour difference.
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
crazy.
It's absolute insanity, but it happens too often. Because have you ever heard of the concept of boiling a frog?
No, man. Help me with
Okay.
this.
Okay. So there is a concept that, based on a frog's anatomy, if you were to put it on a pan and
Yeah.
you slowly were to turn the pan up, they can't recognize the temperature differences, won't recognize that it's actually gotten hotter, and they actually cook. But if you took the same frog and you put it on a searing pan, it would recognize the pain and immediately jump. The
Hmm.
reason why I'm saying this is this. If you were told 4 years ago that you need to charge $110 an hour, and the pressure slowly went up over time, you may not recognize that you're actually being cooked alive. But the fact that you can say, I'm able to adjust and be more sensitive to the slow changes, you'll recognize it and be able to make the proper adjustments. So don't be like the frog. Don't wait for the pressure to cook you. Get ahead of it and turn off the flame.
Nice touch, man. I love that. Full circle back, taking that analogy, using that for us. I mean, there's no better time than to step up to the plate and take action on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even asking anyone who's listening to this to just arbitrarily start charging 300 plus an hour, or 4 or 5 or even 600. Heck, we've
Mm-hmm.
got rates in our clientele that are over $600 an hour, and that happens. And you
Mm-hmm.
might be thinking, how is that ever reasonable? And when you do the math, it checks out based on the work you're providing, based on the demand that you're facing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, still, it doesn't matter if you're at $1,000 an hour. If you're closing 80% plus and your demand is increasing, your only option is to increase your price. No matter how you want to argue that, if you want to serve at the highest level, that's just what you have to do. And that's the basic principles of supply and demand. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, actually, you touched on it last when you were saying about supply and demand, because I like using car analogies when it comes into sales.
Let's
Like,
do
if
it.
you think to yourself and say, like, all right, I want to buy a Honda, or I want to buy a Kia, or you want to buy, like, there's decent cars, there's no issues with
Yep.
that, right? You would go in expecting to say, all right, a brand new car may be anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000,
Yep.
right? But if you took that same car and you took it to a separate dealership, like the difference between what is the Escalade for the Cadillac versus getting a fully loaded SUV.
Right.
Really, the brand is what you're paying for. You're paying for the
Mm-hmm.
luxury, you're paying for the convenience. So if someone were to tell you that same car from Cadillac were to cost $30,000 more, it's meant with the, well, yeah, it's a Cadillac. You expect this, 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 and this with it.
Yep.
But I guarantee that same parts and material would be less. So the point I'm trying to get across with this is that you never know what someone's value is, but I guarantee there's something that you're seeing in your industry or related industry where you would be willing to pay more and say, well, yeah, it's a Rolls Royce. Yeah, it's a Cadillac. Of course, it's a Mercedes. You have
Yeah.
to make a certain expense. So that's really what I'm coming down to for that reference.
100%, man. And I've got one. I'll meet you there halfway with the cars. Have you ever seen a Lamborghini commercial on television, radio, or other?
No, not
Ever
once.
seen a Ferrari commercial?
Nope,
Bentley commercial?
not once.
None of those multiple hundred of thousands of dollar cars
Mhm.
have commercials. Ironically, some of the highest priced ticketed stuff around sells itself. And the
Mhm.
people that buy those things are awfully proud that they bought those things. And they tend to have their own referral network growing, a network of just word of mouth happening that sells them. I've never
Mhm.
seen anyone buy a Ferrari or a Lamborghini and go park it in the garage and say, well, check that bullet box out to the bucket list. Stumbling on my words here. Ironically, though, in our program, the highest billable has
Mhm.
the same thing happening for them, the least marketing budget,
Mhm.
and they're thriving. Why do you think that is? Even though, I know the majority of listeners are going, but I can't fathom charging 300 an hour, let
Mhm.
alone 5 or 600 an hour. What's the difference between the person that does and is able to do it and have no problem with it,
Mhm.
and the person that's, listening to this going, there's no way, guys.
So really the thing that I would say, like, if you were to have one key difference between one and the other, it would be sometimes you have to put your faith in front of the horse. And what that means is that, like, some people need to see the evidence in order to believe, but seeing doesn't mean faith. Sometimes you have to believe that the thing is going to work and that you're worth what it is. And then once you're confidently able to deliver at that, this is just the way things are now. Like, it's okay if you believe it. But the fact is that if you do, your team will communicate it more authentically than anyone ever could who's just being paid to do so.
I love that, man. I love that. And guys, we want to help you with this. So I've got a couple ideas here, Joe.
Go for it.
What do you say we open up the Price Tool Academy value piece again and get some people in there? You're able to actually just reach out to us where you saw this recording first, on our website, at our contact form, on our Facebook group, or even Instagram if you see us there. If you reach out and say the magic words Price Tool, we'll literally send you a bit of a login for our academy and give you access to our pricing tool so that you can be priced accordingly and get help with handling the price objections early on, getting ahead of that to get your confidence up and put that faith in front of the horse so that you can act as if and go make your first deal happen. If you didn't notice from our win of the week, like Brandon, like he's up 40K because he put that faith in front and did the thing. How much are you leaving on the table is the big question I have for you. That is exactly the question we answered today. Why you need to be priced at 300 plus an hour. Guys, if you have any questions, again, join us on our Facebook group. Open up the dialogue with us there. We're happy to talk through it, Joe. Anything else you want to add today?
No, just want to say, guys, the thing that you do today, if that thing is changing your price for the better, is one of the most impactful levers you're ever going to pull. So pull that lever, Kronk. Make it happen.
Let's go. See you next week. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Million Dollar Electrician podcast.
We hope you're buzzing with new ideas that charge up to take your business to the next level.
So don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with fellow electricians. Together, we'll keep the current flowing.